location sensing. So as you understand, location is an important aspect of any IoT networks, where the data that you are sensing has to be associated, right? Not always, but in most of the cases, has to be associated with a spatial coordinate, right? Once you report temperature, the temperature has to come from a certain location. And often we look at both time and space at the same time. So this is sort of a spatio-temporal data. So, and in this like series of lectures, right, at least we'll have like 3 or 4 lectures on trying to see how the system of localization works, right, in a basic sense. And then I'll also share some research papers that will help you more to understand uh, the background of localization. Okay, so today I'll give a basic primer of localization, followed by GPS, which is one of the de facto ways to localize IoT devices that are outdoors. Okay, so what does this localization mean, right? It always comes with a series of ifs and buts, right? Where what is the premise of your localization system? Are you talking about a city? On the left hand side on the top, I'm trying to show that, okay, this is a roughly the area where you are located at. And this happens pretty much when you are trying to make a phone call, or you are associated with a cellular base station. You say that I am in this area, right? Just based on your cell tower connectivity, I can approximately tell that you are in this part of the city, right? Or if you want to do a little bit more refined one, right, as I show in the middle, which floor of the shopping mall you are in, right? It could be on the top floor, it could be in the 5th floor. That is also a lot of information, right? So if you look at this series of the granularity at which these things are changing, on the right hand side I show you which shop you are in, or in which display you are in front of, right? So all of these things have different use cases. It's not always important for like different applications uh, to have all sorts of granularities. So some of the applications will require a high level of granularity. For example, or this one, right? So this could be used for, let's say, ad targeting, right? I want to target uh, ads to customers, and I really want to know what kind of products the customer likes, right? So if you remember, we are talking about uh, the touch sensing concept we brought into physical analytics in stores, right? So in the same way, right, if I can also localize the person who likes a particular like model of this Titan watches, right, I could gain a lot of knowledge regarding the customer behavior, right? So they will require a really granular location sensing, whereas in a case like this, right, I just want to uh, this is required more to optimize the performance of cellular network, right? If I am a particular part in the city, I really want to know how much people are there at a given time, and based on that I can do some load balancing, and that could be an application, right? How many people are connected to my base station at a certain point of the day in a certain portion of the city, right? Based on that I can change the transmit power levels, receive power levels, and I could actually implement some load balancing algorithms based on the location of the different people. Okay, so this is a very broad concept, very generic concept, and it has a lot of use cases, some of which are these, right? As you can see, starting from uh, locations like airports, right, where uh, one example could be this is again still missing, right? How long you want to wait for your your bag to arrive, right, while you are standing in front of the belt. The simple solution that has been implemented and then also tried out in some of the airports was, can I put an RFID tag on top of your bag, right? And then all the way when it is coming from the plane and being delivered to you, right? There are like many RFID readers which are in the path and continuously reporting the location or of the bag, right? So if you have an app that always tells you that your estimated time to wait before you receive the bag. So these are like different use cases. Another thing is that in a shopping mall, if you want to look for a particular item, how do you go there, right? Very easily. So sometimes I have a list of items that I need to buy, and just that it happens to be a new shop that I have not entered earlier, right? So I just want to know the least route, right? Like I don't want to walk a lot with this all the shopping cart, but I just want to know the most efficient route to take me to that particular item. Okay. And the completely on the other side of the spectrum, you can see this disaster sites, right? So disaster sites, they also they urgently require this sort of localization application where assume these people who are trying to enter the room in the flood or in the fire, they need to be tracked, right? And often what happens is there is no pre-deployed infrastructure inside such sites, right? They are destroyed, or they are like common places. They do not have infrastructure like airports or shopping malls, right? uh, like pretty normal, ordinary places where I need in situ localization. Uh, Another thing, as you can like very you are acquainted with this example, like Alexa or Google Nest kind of things, right? Or Siri, right? Where they will have these home devices, smart home devices, and they will have microphones installed on top of them, or even they could have beacons, right? Uh, I could hear a microphone. Is there somebody's microphone is on? Just because I hear a humming sound. Okay, so this could also be used for locating people, right? Because you are talking from different portions of your house. How do you figure out? Like for example, we can always figure out who the person is by doing some analysis on the audio signals, right? Once you can fingerprint the person, let's say I want to know, or like companies like Google or Amazon Alexa, they want to know that where exactly is the voice coming from. So where are you spending more time? So like this is called like in-house analytics, you can call it, right? Or who are the people who stay together at the house, right? Because some people leave the house in the morning, they will come back in the evening. In between, there will be some people, right? So they really want to sort of make the best guess of the people, right? And they want to get a lot of information about your lifestyle, and they're always sort of hunting for this information, right? And for them, localization also has a very like big use case. So for doing all these things, right, there are three things you have to keep in mind. One is the modality. What is the technology that you are using to do this localization? And we are going to look at the fundamentals of this technology in the couple of classes that are going to be held next, right? In particular, things like RF, right, or wireless, right? Radio frequency could be used to find out the location in such systems. Of course, audio is used, as you are seeing here, right? They have a microphone installed on these devices. So three things that you need to remember is one is accuracy. So all of them will not have equal kind of an accuracy. Some of them will be very, very accurate and precise, and some of them will not be, right? So you don't want to really use one kind of a technology everywhere, right? Whatever technology that you will need in the disaster sites, right? You might have to locate the building where a victim is, right? If maybe in this particular house there is a victim, right? And all that matters for your localization is like house level, or let's say a couple of houses, right? Which could be like 5 to 10 meters is enough to identify what area the person is, right? Whereas in case of a shopping mall, you have to be really accurate, right? In case you want to go through the aisles, right? Because um, aisles, right? Okay, if you want to go through that shopping aisles, so in those cases you have to be in the resolution of the uh, dimension of the shopping aisles, right? Which could be less than a meter. Okay, so we are trying to go into a centimeter scale. Okay, So those sort of things become more starts playing a role with what modality you want to choose. Okay, the second thing is what is the coverage or the scalability of such systems, right? It could be just limited to only one small table, right, where you are trying to uh, let's say locate your gesture, right, trying to locate your fingertips position, and based on that you are trying to make some human computer interaction device by locating your hands or fingertips position. Is that it, or you are trying to do at a much larger scale where you want to cover an entire shopping mall or a entire airport, right? So that becomes important. How much is the technology going to cover? If it is RF, what is the propagation it will have? Whether it will be too much of a short range or it is going to be a long range. Okay, and that also has a trade-off with the accuracy, right? Do you want to be accurate everywhere, or you just want a general accuracy which is probably 1 meter or 5 meters, and based on your application, and you need a very large coverage. Okay, and the other thing is the deployment cost. Okay, so whether you will have devices that will be deployed every here and there, or you are just going to have a few of these devices that could be sort of deployed in a sparse manner, right? Which one of the deployment strategies we are going to have. And here also we can have things that are calibrated, right, where you know the location of the different anchors or beacons that you are actually throwing around or installing. Or in these cases like disaster sites, you might not have any room for calibration, and sometimes you might have more than one modalities, right? So sometime you might have to fuse them based on their performance, right? Sometimes you have to use something that is very accurate, which might entail a higher cost, right? And then at times you might actually switch to something which has a lower cost in terms of let's say energy, and it is going to give you a lower accuracy. Okay, so this could be the different use cases where by which you can mix and match these different modalities. So now we have to start this process of localization with the concept of coordinate space. And even if you want to locate the ship, in earlier days we used to have this notion of the North Star and the moon and the sun, which is going to help you locate the location of the position of the ship in the sea, right? And then we used more and more advanced machines like compass or the sextant kind of a machine where we can see in which direction the ship is actually going through. Okay, so we do need a reference point. So in the case here, we have this grid system where we have the location laid out in terms of longitude and latitude. We have a grid, or we have some kind of a reference point through which we are moving through, and we have either anchors or some kind of ways to navigate through the space. Right? If I am moving towards the sun in the morning, I am heading towards the east. Right, and then all these compass kind of instruments came, which also gave you a more fine-grained way to navigate. Okay, so you need two things. One is this coordinate space, and within the coordinate space you need a way to navigate. So GPS is another example where you actually have the reference points or anchors that are located in space, that are the satellites, and the satellites give you reference points to locate your GPS device. So not only GPS, but also in case of location systems that we see around, let's say using cell towers, that also could be reference points. Right? So we often say that my phone is connected to a certain cell tower. Let's call it cell 1, and you also have a concept of neighboring cells. So the neighboring cells are the cells in the vicinity of cell 1. And suppose you are moving out of, suppose you are driving, you are moving out of cell 1, you are going to hand off to a different cell, right? So those are the neighboring cells. Let's call them cell 2 and cell 3. and you can get an you can get an estimate of the distance from the different cells to your mobile phone, and that can help you in figuring out the location of the mobile phone. Some approximate location, it will come with some error, and the point here is that we need this set of reference points or anchors. Same is the case of indoor localization, where you might have a set of access points, right? These are wireless access points, APs, that could be installed in your home or in your office, and they will try to figure out the location of the phone that has this APs or the cell towers in its vicinity. Okay, so that is about your coordinate space, and we'll call this entire area where you are trying to localize as an arena. And uh, in the general problem is that given the location of the device or the person, we are trying to look either for an estimate of the distance from the reference points. That is one way, uh, that is called ranging. Okay, that is and the other one is you can just go to some kind of a generic kind of a signature. Okay, so signature of, let's say, signal features. Okay, so this is another way of trying to approach the problem. So in both the cases, what you need is, given an unknown location where your device is at, you either need a range to the reference points, or you need some kind of a signature of the signals that are actually coming from the reference points. So the first method is more analytical, right? There is an analytical way to solve this thing, and this one entails more of machine learning or trying to learn some patterns, right, which we often call fingerprinting. Why fingerprinting? We are at every location you are trying to get a fingerprint of the signals, right? So if this is reference 1, this is reference 3, this is reference 2, you'll have a feature vector, right, where you have features from these three reference points, 1, 2 and 3. It could be signal strength, it could be any other thing. Okay, but all you care about is a fingerprint at every such location or some of those locations, and you can learn that nature of the fingerprint. Okay, and what we are primarily going to focus on in much of the course is the ranging, right, which requires some kind of a inbuilt technology that is already built into some of the modalities that we are going to look at, right? They already inherently support ranging. Okay, so we'll start with the GPS positioning system, and the GPS chips are sort of pervasive in many IoT devices you see these days. Whenever they are deployed outside, they are also going to report the location of your sensing data, and we try to understand the general principles that makes a GPS system, how it works, and so that we can also borrow some concepts that we will learn now and try to apply them in a more constrained setting, let's say indoors, right, where we don't have access to GPS, but we can create a system that mimics what GPS does, right? That mimics the way things work in this particular system. Okay, so this is more for you to learn the fundamentals or the principles on which the system is based on. Sorry. So as you'll see, in case of GPS, what we have is a constellation of 31 satellites. Some of them there could be more, and not all of them are functional, right? There are certain defects that might have happened to some of the satellites, and they go around the Earth in particular orbits, right? And one more thing is that the collection of all of them, they cover the entire Earth, right? Wherever you are on the Earth surface, you will be covered by some of the satellites. Okay, so we'll try to see how this works, right? As I told you earlier, that this GPS satellites act as a reference point in the space, in the sky, and what they do is they will continuously transmit this predetermined coded signal. Okay, so there is a transmitted signal that is always going to be emitted from the GPS satellite. Okay, so this is the transmitter. and the device that you have in your pocket or the IoT device will be your receiver. Okay, and they basically send it's called a predetermined coded signal. It's a series of pseudo random numbers, and you'll have 1023 we call it chips, right? There are this many chips per signal, and it is going to be repeated every 1 millisecond. Okay, so in a second you are basically going to have 1023 million such signals that will be transmitted. Okay, so one sequence every 1 millisecond. And what will happen is this transmitted signal is going to go all the way through right to the atmosphere, and then there will be a received signal at your receiver device, right? Okay, I'll try to explain why this dot is for, so don't worry about it right now. But just try to imagine that it is a broadcast, right? It is not something which is sent to a specific receiver. This is a broadcast. Anybody who is on Earth and who he or she is able to receive the signal, they can receive the signal. Okay? There is no restriction. Okay, and now what happens next is you have to somehow figure out what is your range to the reference point. I understand that your transmitter or the satellite, right? So this is a satellite, the GPS satellite is trying to transmit a signal, and the reason they are transmitting the signal is to figure out this range, the distance, right? In localization literature, we often use the term range. Okay, so what is the range to this particular satellite is something that we are interested in. Okay, and the way that it is done is like this: you transmit a signal, you receive the signal, and then what you do is you already have an idea of what is the transmitted signal going to look like, which is known as the gold code. Okay, so you already have an idea about how the gold code looks like, and what you are going to do is that you are simply going to match or compare the gold code with the received signal, and different portions of the gold code will be misaligned, right? Because this is a delayed copy, right? Whatever you are going to receive as the in the receiver end is a delayed copy of the TX signal. Okay, and what happens is the transmitted signal is going to keep on transmitting, and you are continuously going to get the received signal on the receiver end. And every time you receive the signal on the receiver's end, you have access to the gold code. You are going to do a comparison, see that how much is the offset in terms of time. Okay, so what you can do is that you can simply see that where is the exact pattern that is being repeated, and you can align the received signal based on the gold code, right? And the delta t will be your time offset from your device's perspective. Okay, so this delta t is the time offset that will give you an approximate idea of the range, right? Because this is the time of flight that was taken, that is the time that is taken by the signal to travel from the satellite to the Earth, and that multiplied, because this is an electromagnetic wave, that multiplied by speed of light will give you the distance. Okay, so this distance will have a lot of noise in it. We'll come to that in a moment. But this is a crude way of doing a first cut time offset computation, right? Based on the comparison of the received signal, which is a delayed copy of the transmitted signal, and the gold code. So what we will have in the beginning is these three ranges, right? So the row 1, row 2, and row 3, these three are the ranges. How is it computed? Delta t multiplied by the speed of light is going to give you a range to a given satellite. And as you know, for multilateration, you need at least 3 reference points or 3 reference anchors to locate your position, right? Because you have your coordinates as x, y, and z, like 3 unknowns. You like in common sense, you might actually think that you need 3 equations or like 3 reference points. you might as well think that 3 satellites has to be taken into consideration, and all the satellites clocks are synced up. Okay, so there is not going to be a discrepancy in between the individual delta t's that you are getting with each satellite, because those satellites are all synced up. Okay, what is not synced up is your device. Your device will have a clock drift all the time, because whatever expensive clock you have is still going to show a drift with time. Not only that, it is also not synced up with the satellite. Okay, so the two clocks are completely different, and then given that it is synced up, it is still going to drift with time. So we have another problem like this, which is going to make all these ranges pretty inaccurate. Okay, uh, what is the what is the penalty that you have to put because your clock drift, there is a clock drift, or your delta t computation is not correct? So one ballpark number that I pretty often quote is, let's say if you are off by 1 nanosecond, which is like very short amount of time, but 1 nanosecond multiplied by the speed of light, right, which is a very large number, is going to be something like 1 feet. So the thing is that if you are off by 1 nanosecond, your distance could be drifted by as much as 1 feet, right? And if you have several nanoseconds, it could be several feet, and not only nanosecond, right? Your clock might not be precise enough to keep the clock drift within nanosecond scale. It could be even worse, right? Even if it goes to microseconds, it is sort of intolerable kind of an error. Okay, and this happens, right, like in often when the GPS signal is very poor, right, for other regions, you do see a lot of error that comes, right, not exactly due to synchronization, but other reasons that I'm going to talk about. So now we had 3 satellites. With that, we are not going to have a correct computation of the location, because all these ranges row 1, row 2, and row 3 will be noisy. Okay, and that is the reason we are having inaccurate ranges, leading to an inaccurate localization. So what is a correct way to model the range? A correct way to model the range will be something like this equation, where rho 1 is basically the Euclidean distance between the satellite and the unknown receiver location. So the receiver is located at XU, YU, and ZU. So these are the 3-dimensional coordinate of the receiver, and X1, Y1, and Z1 are the location of the satellite. Okay, so this is the Euclidean distance, and then that will be that will have some kind of a noise which comes because of the clock drifts, right? So this is a noise introduced by clock drifts. Okay, so this is what you are going to get. This is like noisy version of the range. Okay, but what you are really interested in is this part, right? And there's no direct way to get that, right? Because all you are estimating directly is this rho 1 value. Okay, that will have this analytical structure. This will have this Euclidean distance between the receiver location and the satellite, plus the influence of the clock drift. And we are going to have all 4 of them. Okay, and note that this delta clocks is not going to be different for every satellite, because the satellites are themselves synced up. So if you know the clock drift or the offset with one satellite, you can always find out the offset with the other satellites. Okay, so that is just a single unknown that we want to resolve. So for like obvious reasons now, right, we have 4 unknowns. XU is the first unknown, YU is the second unknown, ZU is the third unknown, which basically gives you the location of the person, and you have a 4th unknown that has to be simultaneously solved in order to find out XU, YU, and ZU. So this is the 4th unknown, and for solving that, you need these 4 equations, which are going to be generated from data from 4 satellites. Okay, So only if you solve these equations, you are going to get the location of the person or location of the IoT device. Okay, so hope this is clear. Okay, so I'll give a little bit time to gaze at this formula, and hope this formula is clear to in your head, because we are going to work more on this formula and like do some analytical treatment on this formula, right? So make sure that this is, so you completely understand what is going on. This is a simple Pythagoras theorem giving you the Euclidean distance plus the clock drift noise. Okay. Okay, now we need to solve this set of equations, and I'm going to show you one method that is typically followed in such systems, and this is a convex optimization problem, right? So there could be other ways to do that, but I'll show you a standard way of using this that is typically like used de facto in GPS systems. Okay, the way to through linearization. Okay, so the common approach that is taken in these systems is how do you convert this nonlinear set of equations into a linear set of equations and try to attempt to solve this problem. Okay, there are more examples of how linearization could be done. I'm showing you one of them. Okay, and the red colored things are unknown, as you know. XU, YU, ZU, and TU, these are the unknowns, and rho I is a range estimate, and the I subscript stands for a given satellite. So I could be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So this is something which is the previous measurement. Okay, so rho I hat could be the previous measurement, where we know that XU is the previously measured XU plus some kind of a delta shift, right? Within a small time instant, the device could have moved. So this delta XU is accounted for here. Okay, so it is same for all the four variables, and TU is the clock drift, where the clock is also continuously drifting. So at the current instant, how much was the clock drift was delta TU. And what was the previous clock drift? That is TU cap. Okay, so what we have is the, let's say there is a previous set of measurement, and with that we are adding some kind of a delta increment in all dimensions, in the XYZ, in the position dimension as well as in the time dimension. Okay, and one more terminology that we need to know here is that the actual range estimate Ri. Okay, so this is not smeared with noise, so this is the pure range that would have been there, right? So this is an analytical construct, we are not measuring it directly. So what this Ri cap stands for, this is the range. Okay, range estimate. If you happen to know XU, YU, and ZU perfectly well, then you can always find out Ri. Okay, so we are going to see that how to we are trying to follow an approach of linearizing this set of equations. Okay, so we are going to use something called the Taylor series, and you are all aware of this kind of thing from your first year engineering courses, where xt is a function that we want to expand, right? This is a function that you want to expand, and this could be written as x of t0, where t0 is a specific value of the function x taken at point t0, plus x dot, which is the first order differential of t0 multiplied by t minus t0 plus all these terms. This is the second order differential term. We'll have the third order, fourth order, and so on. And a common trick that is played for such systems where the quantity of these values or the magnitude of these values keep on decreasing with higher order terms, we tend to ignore them, right? So this t minus t naught will be very small, and the square of that will be very, very small, right? And this is typically done without causing much harm to the system. Okay, and we are mostly interested in linearizing, so we don't want to have a lot of quadratic or cubic terms in the system. So as long as we can safely use the linear terms, we are okay, right? So we are just going to consider the first order terms, which will be this and this, and ignore the rest of it, right? All of the terms which are higher order will be ignored. Okay, so you have to keep this formula in mind, right? Even if you ignore the high order terms, it will be x of t naught plus x dot, which is the first order differential of t naught multiplied by t minus t naught. Okay, plus dot dot dot, which we are replacing by a 0, and we are going to use the same formulation to expand our range equations. Okay, so we have these four range equations. This four range equations, we typically call them range equations, and we are going to take the help of Taylor series in order to expand those. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more insight into in this theorem, is that we are not using a single variable t here, but t is basically multidimensional, right? I am showing you an example with three variables where this is a function of x, y, and z, and in our case we will have four variables, though it will be x, y, z as well as time, right? And what will happen if you just consider the first order terms is, let's say you know the value at x naught, y naught, and z naught. So this is your first term, and then you will have the second, like the first order differential terms, which is the second term of your system. Okay, so you do the partial derivative with respect to x, with respect to y, and with respect to z. But if you have four variables, then you also do it with respect to t. Okay, so hope this is clear. Also, this is a direct follow up from the Taylor's theorem. With instead of one variable, we are just using three variables. Okay, and ignore the high order terms. Okay, so let us try to see what happens in our case. So in our case, we have these three equations. The first equation is the simple range equation. The second equation is also a range equation, but taken at the previous instant of time, and we know these mappings. Okay, so how the system is evolving. Okay, so if you know your previous location estimate, you want to figure out how much the system has moved, so that you know xu. Okay, so this was a previous estimate. You are interested in knowing the drift, and this will be your current estimate. Okay, so if you do expand this Taylor's theorem, if you apply that in our equation, this will become something like this, right? This will be rho I is equal to, this will be the base condition where we are trying to use this as the R naught or rho naught, or the previous estimate, right? Minus xu hat by Ri delta xu, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I can show you a sort of a small, like you can do it yourself, but anyway I'm trying to show you for those who are not able to follow. So what we are doing is that we have this thing, right? Let's say I is the location of the satellite's x coordinate, right? So this is xi minus xu, right? We had this squared plus yi minus yu square plus zi minus zu square, right? And let me ignore the delta tu for this point. This is to the power half, right? I'm just trying to show you how this term is coming. Okay, so this was your function, correct? Uh, Actually, this plus cpu, let it be there. So what you are doing, let's say you want to do the differential with respect to x u, right? So what will happen? So you'll take this differential right? And you are seeing this is like to the power half, right? So what will happen is we'll get a minus half here, and then all this entire thing is going to come to the denominator. Okay, so you'll have the same thing, square root of this xi minus xu whole square plus dot 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 till zi minus zu whole square. Right, so this thing you'll have, and on the top what you will have is the typical differentiation operation that we are doing. So 2 into xi minus xu, right? This is what you will have. Okay, and into minus will come. So this one, these twos will get cancelled out, and this one is nothing but r, right? So as I already told you that this is the true or the pure range, right? So this r will come, and that is why we are getting a structure like this xi minus xu hat by ri hat, right? So please bear this thing in mind, how exactly it is coming, and I try to show you the way by which you can derive this entire thing. Okay, hope this is clear. You can try it out yourself, right? Simply write this equation and plug in the Taylor's theorem and figure out the value of rho I. Okay, so the point to note here is that once you do that, right, you will have all these different things stacked up, right? One is xi minus xu hat by ri, which we start calling as axi. Okay, yi minus y, this thing we call it ay, and the other one is that azi, and this I, as I am telling you repeatedly, is the satellite index, right? For a given satellite, it will be just a constant, right? It will be like az1 or az2 or az3. You have prior information about the location of the satellites, right? So for a given satellite, all of these are known. So if it is a satellite number 3, you will have z3, y3, and x3. So this is known. Okay, and similarly here we are trying to have this value of delta pi, which is pi minus or rho I minus rho I hat. Okay, so that was the drift or shift in the value of the rho that we are trying to measure. Okay, so now we can simply write this entire thing as follows. We can write it as rho I, delta rho I is equal to axi into delta xu plus ayi into delta yu plus like this, right? Now what you can appreciate is that we have converted this entire nonlinear system of equations into a linear form by which you can tackle more easily compared to the other one, right? Compared to that nonlinear form that we have shown you in the very beginning. Yeah, this is a very common practice that is done in such systems, and that's why I wanted to introduce you, right, so that you are familiar with such a treatment. Okay, so now you have already, all of you, I am sure, have taken some course on linear algebra where you try to solve a system of linear equations in this fashion, right? And all of you could already appreciate that this is in the form of a multiplied by x equal to b, and you can you can very easily figure out the values of the drifts. Okay, so these are the values to be solved. Okay, and every time you get a GPS update, you are continuously going to be tracked, right? How much was your delta xu? So given your initial location is this, once you get a GPS update, there will be a delta xu in the x direction, delta yu in the y direction, and if you are sort of traveling in the same plane, there is not much of an update in delta z, and the time will also be updated so that you will get your next location. Okay, next location. So the initially, sometimes you will see it takes a long time for the GPS to fix your location. So this is called the initial GPS fix, right? Where you actually go through the equations to solve them and figure out what is your exact location, right? And sometimes, often they will cache the value of your GPS location from your previous fixes, right? And if you go to a completely different location, it will take some long time in order to sync up with your new GPS fix. And then once the GPS is fixed, the updates are pretty sort of non time taking, right? It's not going to take a long time to have an incremental update. Okay, so the initial fix, remember this, right? So the initial fix takes time, okay, which is acquiring all the satellites, getting a pretty accurate solution for the system. And then once the GPS fix has taken place, it will be iteratively sort of incremented or updated based on new incoming range measurements, okay, by this way. And now all there could be a lot of noise in the system, there could be other artifacts, let's say in a small duration of time you are not receiving GPS data, right? Suddenly you are cut off, right, from GPS signals. So often they will try to assume that you are probably moving in a similar speed, and they're going to interpolate some of the locations in between. Right, this happens pretty often if you are traveling, let's say through a tunnel. That before entering the tunnel, you had a GPS fix. You are iteratively, very nicely getting the GPS fixes. Once you enter the tunnel, right? Let's say this is the entrance of the tunnel. So once you enter the tunnel, no GPS things are coming. No GPS ranges, right? So either for a small duration of time, you can think that you are going probably following the same delta x and delta y increments, right? And they are going to do some interpolation in between them, or if there is noise, they can use some filtering algorithm like Kalman filter and so on. And if it doesn't work, right, there have been new things like sensor fusion. Okay, so what is this? Earlier, you just had one modality. You had one modality like that is a GPS, but now IMU, right, or the inertial motion sensors in your phone can also take a role into this, right? The IMU can also tell you what was your delta x and delta y for a small duration of time. Right? If you leave it for a longer time, IMU is not going to work well, right? It is going to completely drift out the solution, and that happens, right? Once you enter a tunnel, you can actually experience it, right? If you drive and go through a tunnel, this is a real example. You can see what happens with Google Maps, right? Once you lose connectivity with the GPS satellites. Okay, so this is just for your overall, so that you understand the big picture of what happens with these things, right? And you also have a clear idea about how these range equations are solved, and how we are getting this value of delta x, delta y, and delta z. And because of this time offset correction, we need a fourth variable, TU. Why this is needed, and what is the necessity of having 4 satellites instead of 3 satellites? So you are in a position to answer these questions. Okay. So this is some details, right, which you may or may not remember. So one thing you have to remember that these operate in like 1.5 gigahertz band. So if somebody asks you about the spectrum at which GPS data, like the GPS signals, are transmitted, this is around 1.5 gigahertz, right? So you are not allowed to go and transmit any information at that particular band, right? Because it is just going to jam all GPS devices in that area, right? And you can very easily do that using something called a software defined radio, SDR. And this is very cheap. It is very cheaply available. Radio transmitters who can transmit at a given frequency. So if you do transmit at a given frequency, all of the devices which are in the vicinity, right, given that how much power you are dissipating using the SDR, right, it is called software defined radio. So you can basically control this entire radio using software. Right? If you're interested, you can look it up. Right? There's something called USRP and so on. Right? And if you go and transmit all the GPS related data that are actually legitimately present in this frequency will be garbled. Okay, this is one way to do an attack on such systems, right? And you should not be doing it, right? If they catch you, right, you'll be arrested, right? So this is an illegal thing to do. Okay. So the GPS, as I told you, continuously sends this pseudo-random number sequence, and that is repeated every 1 millisecond. So you basically have 1023 million chips per second. Okay, and this uses CDMA, like code division multiplexing, where you can simultaneously listen to multiple satellites, although they are transmitting at the same time. That doesn't matter. That is not going to interfere with each other's transmissions because they are using a different PRN sequence. So you can receive all of them. Okay, and the navigation data is coded on top of this PRN sequence. Okay, so what is the navigation data? The navigation data consists of the GPS date and time. Often after the initial fix, right, the GPS date and time is very accurate. That is actually kept using the atomic clocks that are present on the GPS device. So they are very, very accurate. So sometimes your system can update its time using the GPS date and time. And then they will have orbital information, where the location of the satellite is, in which orbital it is traveling through, what is its constellation, what is the signal health, right? How far it is. It will modify your SNR, right? The SNR of the signal that is being received from the satellite. So that will, all those kind of information will be available once you receive the data. Okay. And this is something that you can actually, if you happen to have a GPS chip, you can read out this information, right? If it is an like, let's say I2C, I2C device, you can read out all this raw information coming from the GPS chip. Okay? So you can see how many satellites are visible. You can see what is the signal strength to each one of the satellites, what are their orbital positions, and so on, right? And you can also look at your own position that has been fixed by the GPS chip. Okay, so your velocity, your location in the 3D space. So India, like GPS is the US system, right? And India does have the system called Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, right? And we call it NAVIC, right? So it is NAVIC is basically the sailor, right? Which is pretty common term in Hindi or Sanskrit, right? NAVIC is the sailor, and this is sort of a guide or your navigator. Okay, that's how this NAVIC name comes. And we have like 6 operational satellites which do not cover the entire Earth, but it does cover India, right, and maybe some other Southeast Asian countries. Okay, and you'll very interestingly see that one of them failed because there is some problem with the atomic clocks, right? This is a snapshot I've taken from Wikipedia. So just because the atomic clocks have failed, it is able to send the messages, right? But the problem is that it cannot be used for localization because it cannot time sync it with respect to the other satellites. Okay, so for that reason, the entire satellite cannot be used for any localization purposes. Okay, so this is about the GPS, right? The GPS localization system, where we need a minimum of 4. Remember this, right? We need a minimum of 4 satellites. Okay, and ideally you should need like 8 or 7 or like even more than that, right? In a situation where this range measurements will become really, really noisy. So in those cases, we'll require much more than that. And as an exercise, we are going to explore that what is a good number for this number of satellites in order to get a good fix. Okay. And as I told you, this could be replaced by other modalities, right? Even if you go and use the same principles to your indoor localization system. Let's say be it microphones or speakers or let's say wireless access points, right? Let's say these are wireless access points, cellular base station, or be it a sound source. So the principles doesn't change. Okay. So what you need is called ranging. So this ranging is very, very fundamental. So this is something that you have to bear in mind, right? For the analytical techniques to work. Okay. And then there is this fingerprinting based techniques, which has its own problems because it requires a lot of training, and the training data, like nobody gives you training data, right? So how do you actually train the system? Although those are existent, and we are also going to discuss them in our class, but we are primarily going to focus our attention on the ranging based systems, where this is something that is really, really required in order to solve the location for this guy, right? For the mobile, or you often call it UE, or the user equipment. Okay. So there is no change in the principles. You have these range equations, and with these range equations, you need to solve the range equation in order to solve for the location of the mobile phone. Okay. So now I'll ask you one more question: is what about the location of the anchors? Right? Is there any preference how this anchors has to be in order to mm, make this location of the device more correct? Okay. So all till now we cared about these ranges. Let's say this is row 1, this is row 2, and this is row 3. Okay. And we knew the location of the anchor x1 y1. Let's say this is in 2D. We knew x2 y2, and we knew x3 y3. Okay. And we are trying to find out the location of xu and yu. So these are the unknown device, right? So this is your IoT device. So can some of you shed some light about the relative location of the A's, the anchors, which is going to give you a good localization accuracy at XU and YU? Okay. Can anybody give a try, or at least if you did not understand the question properly, maybe you can ask me. So let me reiterate the question, right? So one is there any specific deployment of these A's that is going to make the solution more accurate? Because the reason is that this will be always have some kind of a noise, right? So some epsilon noise will always be present, right? So is there any specific arrangement of A's that will make the solution more accurate or poor? So what will happen if all of these A's are pretty close by, right? So if you have this A, let's call them A1, A2, and A3. So let's say they are here, right? Let's say this is in a straight line, and you have this one, and this device is here. Okay, so this is the XU and YU. So is this a favorable condition in which you are going to get a good localization accuracy?
No, sir. I mean, because of noise, row 1, row 2, row 3 might be almost equal.
Exactly. And yeah, you are very right. So you are saying that this will be all pretty much similar, so it doesn't matter. So what happens if you have A1, A2, and A3 spaced out? Let me rub this. Yeah, what will happen? So this is now A1, this is now A2, and this is now A3. Is this a good idea to cling on to? Or you can propose something which is better.
So, I mean, if it distance becomes very large, even the noise will become very high then.
No, let's say we are able to maintain the noise to some extent, right? Let's say it is not going to be kilometers of noise, right? Let's say it will be some meter, few meters, right? But let's say we can contain the noise within a certain upper bound, but here we are trying to focus on the geometry of A1, A2, and A3. It's a question from geometry, right? How exactly it is a favorable, or can you propose something better?
Sir, maybe like a triangle, and the centroid will be the UE.
Correct. And why is it so?
Because we have spatial difference, and at the same time ranges which are almost equal.
Ranges equal is not a problem. Ranges is, let's say, ranges equal is not the main problem. The main problem is the diversity, right? So if you have a collinear, so these are collinear points.
We won't know which side of that line the point is lying.
Yes, that is a very good point. You don't know, because this could be either this or this, right? So you don't know which side of the line it is lying. So what happens is 2 is good enough to know this, right? 2 is good enough to know which side, or this will give you in a 2D space, even with some noise present, right? What will happen is, let me draw it nicely. So this is something that you need to understand in order to have a better intuition about localization. Okay, so let's say this is one anchor A1 and this is another one anchor A2. Okay, so what is happening? Let's say you know the range rho 1. So what does rho 1 mean? The rho 1 means that it is going to be on this circle, right? I'm not good in drawing circles, but yeah. So this will be approximately anywhere on this circle, but the problem is that it also comes with some kind of an error, right? It will be more like a ring. And with A2 also, it is going to be something like this. Okay, because you know rho 2. So it could be either some blob here or some blob here. Right now, there's a tiebreaker which will be broken by the A3. And if A3 becomes collinear, or it sometimes becomes like somewhere in the vicinity of A1 and A2, it is not going to help you much. Right. So if A2 or A3 is located somewhere else, right? Let's say on the other side of a triangle, right? Then it can very easily find out this is rho 3 and it will be somewhere here. Okay. So this will be the intersection of these 3 circles. So it will be this part of this is for rho 1. Let's say this is for rho 2, right? And this is for rho 3. So approximately here it will be located. So more the spatial diversity that is presented by A1, A2, and A3, you can better localize the particular thing, right? The particular device. So this is something in a practical sense you will see if you go towards a tall building, right? What will happen is that it is still doing a multilateration using the satellites. So if you are looking at only one side of the sky and rest of the other side of the sky is blocked, right? Because you have buildings, the signals are blocked. So you will see a considerable error that is coming, because you are trying to localize using satellites which are only located on this side of the building. Okay, and these are all blocked. Okay, so you can do a very practical demonstration yourself and see what is the problem with this particular idea. Okay, so as long as your reference points are spatially diverse or located in sort of a distributed manner in terms of geometry, then only you are going to look at fairly good localization accuracy, right? Not only with GPS, any other thing, but GPS is something that you can very easily see, right? You can simply turn on Google Maps, right, and then locate your location, and then you slightly move to the one side of the building, you'll see that there'll be a lot of error that is going to come in, right? And maybe Google Maps will be smart enough to track your IMU and see that you are not moving much. In that way, there could be a correction. But yeah, there are other ways to track the GPS accuracy, and that we are also going to explore in the homework. Okay, so this has a name called geometric dilution of precision. So if these are the 2 anchors, as I told you, these are the locations where you can have the device located, right? Because this is, you cannot avoid. So this is the epsilon which is coming from the noise, right? So this is the uncertainty. So this is the range uncertainty. So there is some error that is associated, always associated with the range. You cannot help it, right? But what you can do is that you can nicely choose the set of anchors in such a way so that this geometric dilution of precision reduces. So your precision dilutes. So your precision gets diluted. Okay, so this more like fat these areas are, right, poorer will be a localization accuracy, because this is sort of the denominator of your, like, let's say, what is the probability that you can find out the person accurately in this location. So you are saying that I can be rest assured that the person is in this box, right? But you cannot know more than that because this epsilon is preventing it. Okay, the epsilon and as well as the relative location of the anchors is preventing it. And if you have something like this, right, which are like more closely spaced, right, as one of you told that row 1 and row 2 will be pretty much equal. So in those cases, if you are seeing the dilution of precision is like so poor, it's like really diluted. So now you are saying that, okay, the device could be located somewhere here. Okay, so this is much poorer, right? Much poorer accuracy. Okay, and this is something that you will always see, right? I don't know whether it is now, but earlier version of Google Maps, they used to have a circle around your point, right, where you are. So that was the circle of uncertainty. So based on the GPS signals that Google Maps was receiving, they came up with an uncertainty metric. So if it is really not certain, they will see a very large sort of a radius, right, of the circle, right? And once it becomes more and more accurate, right, the radius of the circle will shrink, right? It will slowly become small. And if it really knows where you are with a very large confidence, it will just be a dot. Okay, so they somehow very nicely converted this uncertainty in a, like, in the visual form, right, which was like very easy for like common people like us to understand what is the uncertainty that is associated with your location. Okay, and it has a lot to do with the dilution of precision, what satellites you are actually syncing up with, how many satellites are there, what is the signal strength of the satellite, how much noise is there in the range computation. So all of these things starts playing a role. Okay, and a few more examples like this, where the dilution of precision is the measured data, how much area that you are basically can measure the data, and the output locations area, right? In this case, you are seeing that the output location area is like very large. Okay, so the intersection of these three circles, the deep black, the dark color patch is your sort of output location, whereas in this case it is very sharp. Okay, so it is, if it is on three corners of a triangle, as somebody of you like pointed out, it will be really nice, whereas if it is just collinear set of points or something like the fourth example, you are going to see a poorer localization accuracy, even with the same range performance. See, the range performance, this epsilon is not changing. How much error you are going to have in these two cases are not changing. What is changing is the geometry of the anchor locations, and that is playing such a big role. Okay, so I introduced you with the basics of localization, right? Some of the different constructs, and one popular example is GPS. So this is something that will be used, and in the near future, of course, these things will be used for all the IoT devices that are operating outdoors, right? For indoors, it is a different story. For outdoors, it will be all there, and the principles that we have studied now, it will be also applicable for the techniques that we will learn later, right? So the principles will not change. Okay, and based on today's class, right, we have the homework too. I'm going to share this homework with you. I have kept a pretty decent time frame for you to work on, right? And mind you that it is not going to take more than a day or at least 1.5 days to complete this. right? So don't keep on postponing your homework and later tell me that, oh, we have this thing, we have Diwali and so on, so we are not able to work on it, right? So scoop out one day from your schedule, right, and try to finish it off, right? So that, and you also have a quiz too, right? I'll not try to put it right now. So let us complete some portion of the localization, and maybe in like mid of November, right, before the semester dissolves, either on 7th or 5th or the last week of the class, we might have the next quiz. Okay. So please start working on homework so that you also keep on learning what is going on in the class.